ab, nach links, geht aber aus dem Kornschieber raus. Das muss man
The rain came down in sheets across Manhattan's Upper East Side, turning the streets into rivers of reflected neon and headlights. Inside Lombardi's, the most exclusive Italian restaurant in the city, the storm was nothing more than a distant soundtrack, a gentle percussion against the tall windows that separated the wealthy diners from the chaos of the outside world. Victor Russo sat alone at his usual corner table, the one that gave him a clear view of both entrances and the kitchen door. Old habits. After 30 years in his line of work, certain instincts became as natural as breathing. The table was set for one, as it had been every Thursday evening for the past 6 months. White tablecloth, fresh roses in a crystal vase, a bottle of Barolo already breathing beside an untouched glass. He was 45 years old, though the weight of his decisions made him feel ancient. His dark suit was impeccable, tailored on Savile Row during his last trip to London. His graying hair was swept back, and his hands, those hands that had signed papers affecting thousands of lives, rested calmly on the table. To anyone watching, he looked like just another successful businessman enjoying a quiet dinner. They couldn't see the exhaustion in his eyes, the way his shoulders carried an invisible burden that had grown heavier with each passing year. Victor hadn't come here to eat. He'd come here to think, to remember, to say goodbye to a life he'd built brick by brick, decision by decision, until the structure had grown so tall he could no longer see the ground. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversation. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers. Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. Victor recognized the album. His father had played it constantly when he was a child, back when life was simpler, back when the family business meant something different than it did now, back when he still had choices. "Good evening, Mr. Russo." The voice pulled him from his thoughts. He looked up to find a woman he'd never seen before standing beside his table. She wore the standard server uniform, white shirt, black vest, black slacks, but there was something about her that didn't quite fit. Maybe it was the way she stood, balanced and alert, like someone ready to move at a moment's notice. Or maybe it was her eyes, dark brown, intelligent, and far too observant for someone simply taking dinner orders. She was in her late 20s, he guessed. Dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, olive skin, high cheekbones. Pretty, but not in the delicate way of the usual servers here. There was a strength to her features, a quiet confidence that made him take notice. "I haven't seen you here before," Victor said, his voice carrying the faint trace of a Brooklyn accent he'd never quite lost, despite years of trying. "First week?" she replied, placing a menu in front of him even though they both knew he wouldn't need it. He ordered the same thing every time. "My name is Elena. I'll be taking care of you this evening." Elena. He tested the name, noting the slight emphasis she placed on the second syllable. "Italian?" "Spanish, actually. My mother was from Barcelona." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "But I grew up here. Queens." Victor nodded slowly, studying her face. There was something there, something familiar in the careful way she held herself, in the practiced neutrality of her expression. He'd spent decades reading people, learning to see past the masks they wore. This woman was wearing several. "What happened to Maria?" he asked, referring to his usual server. "Her daughter had a baby. She took some time off." Elena's hands were steady as she poured water into his glass. Not a drop spilled, despite the slight tremor he could feel through the floor. The subway running beneath the city, a constant reminder that even here, in this bubble of wealth and refinement, the real world was always churning just below the surface. "I'll have the osso buco," Victor said, closing the menu without looking at it. "And tell Giuseppe to make it how my father liked it. He'll know what I mean." Elena wrote nothing down, simply nodded. "Of course, and the wine? I'll start with the Barolo. We'll see where the evening takes us from there." "Very good." She turned to leave, then paused, looking back at him with those observant eyes. "If you don't mind my saying, sir, you look like a man with something heavy on his mind." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Do I? 28 years waiting tables in this city teaches you to read people," she said quietly. "You learn to spot the tourists, the first dates, the business deals, the celebrations, and you learn to recognize the ones who are saying goodbye to something." For a long moment, Victor said nothing. The jazz continued its melancholy progression. The rain intensified against the windows. Somewhere in the restaurant someone laughed, a sound that seemed to come from a different world entirely. "You're perceptive," he finally said. "It's a gift, sometimes a curse." Elena's expression softened slightly. "Whatever you're wrestling with, I hope you find your answer." She walked away before he could respond. disappearing into the kitchen with a grace that seemed almost practiced. Victor watched her go, feeling unsettled in a way he couldn't quite name. Something about her presence had shifted the air in the room, like a barometric change before a storm. He poured himself a glass of wine, swirling it absently as he stared at the dark liquid. 6 months ago, his oldest friend had betrayed him. Not for money, not for power, but because Victor had refused to cross a line that his friend had been willing to sprint past. The family business had always operated in shades of gray, but there were still some things, some lines, that Victor refused to compromise on. That refusal had cost him. Allies had become enemies. Old agreements had dissolved. Territory he'd held for years was suddenly contested. And worst of all, his daughter, his beautiful, innocent Sophia, had started asking questions about what exactly her father did for a living. She was 19 now, in her second year at Columbia, studying art history. She wanted to open a gallery someday, to bring beauty into the world. She had her mother's eyes, her mother's kindness. She was everything good that Victor had somehow managed to create despite the darkness of his world. And she was asking questions he couldn't answer without destroying the image she had of him. So he'd made a decision. He'd started the process of stepping back, of dismantling the empire he'd built. But in his world, retirement wasn't as simple as signing papers and walking away. There were people who saw his withdrawal as weakness, who viewed the vacuum of power as an opportunity. There were old rivals, who remembered old grudges. There were younger, hungrier men who thought they could take what was his. And there was Marco Castellano, his consigliere, his right hand for 15 years. Marco, who had looked Victor in the eye 3 days ago and told him that certain people were tired of waiting for him to make up his mind. Certain people who thought that maybe it was time for new leadership. Certain people who had made it clear that Victor's time was running out. The message had been delivered with respect, almost with regret, but the threat had been unmistakable. And Victor, tired of the endless calculations, the constant vigilance, the weight of always being one step ahead, had made his choice. He would face it. Whatever was coming, he would face it with his eyes open. Elena returned with his meal, setting the plate down with practiced care. The osso buco looked perfect, the veal tender, falling off the bone, the sauce rich and aromatic. His father had ordered this dish every Sunday at the little restaurant in Bensonhurst, back when that neighborhood still felt like home. Giuseppe says to tell you that some recipes are worth keeping, Elena said softly, that they connect us to where we came from. Victor looked up at her sharply. That sounded like a message, like Giuseppe was trying to tell him something. The old chef had known his father, had known the family since before Victor was born. He would understand what was happening, what Victor was walking away from. Thank you, Victor said, his voice rough with emotion he didn't quite know how to express. Elena started to leave, then hesitated. Mr. Russo, I don't usually do this, but would you mind if I asked you something? Go ahead. Do you believe in second chances? In starting over? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning he couldn't quite parse. Victor studied her face, looking for the angle, the hidden agenda. But all he saw was genuine curiosity, maybe even a hint of desperation. I used to, he said finally. Now I'm not so sure. Some paths, once you start walking them, they don't have exit ramps. I think that's where you're wrong, Elena said quietly. I think exit ramps exist. They're just hard to see when you're moving at high speed. Sometimes you have to be willing to crash to find them. Before Victor could respond, the front door of the restaurant opened. 3 men walked in, shaking rain from their coats. They were dressed well, but not quite well enough for Lombardi's. Their suits were off the rack, their shoes scuffed, and they moved with a purpose that had nothing to do with dinner reservations. Victor recognized them immediately. Not their faces. He'd never seen these particular men before, but he recognized what they were. Soldiers. Muscle. The kind of men sent to deliver messages that couldn't be sent over the phone. His hand moved instinctively toward his jacket, toward the weight he carried there out of habit. Then it stopped. He'd made his choice. He was tired of the endless cycle of threat and response, of violence and retaliation. If these men were here for him, then perhaps it was time to finally stop running from the consequences of his life. He picked up his fork, cut a piece of veal, and ate slowly. The meat was perfect, exactly as he remembered from his childhood. Some recipes were worth keeping. Some memories were worth honoring. The 3 men spread out through the restaurant, moving with the coordination of people who'd done this before. Other diners were starting to notice, conversations dropping to whispers. The maitre d' approached them nervously, his professional composure cracking. Victor took another bite. He could taste the wine reduction, the herbs, the slow-cooked richness that only came from patience and care. His father had always said that good food was about more than sustenance. It was about tradition, about connection, about remembering where you came from so you'd know where you were going. One of the men was walking toward his table now. Young, maybe 25, with hard eyes and a thin scar across his left cheek. His hand was inside his jacket. Victor knew what was coming. He'd seen it before, ordered it before, though he'd always tried to avoid civilian locations. These men clearly didn't share his scruples. Victor set down his fork carefully, took a long sip of wine, and waited. He wasn't afraid. After 30 years of looking over his shoulder, there was something almost peaceful about finally standing still. The man was 10 feet away now, 8 feet, 6, and then Elena was there. She materialized between them like smoke, her movement so smooth and practiced that for a moment Victor thought he was imagining it. She was holding a tray of water glasses, moving as if to refill the tables near Victor's corner. The man tried to step around her, his face showing annoyance. "Excuse me, sir," Elena said pleasantly, her voice carrying just loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "I need to get past." "Move," the man growled, his hand still inside his jacket. Elena didn't move. Instead, she looked directly at Victor, and in her eyes he saw something that made his breath catch. Recognition, understanding, and a warning so clear it might as well have been written in neon. "Not tonight," she said quietly. The words meant only for Victor's ears. The man's hand came out of his jacket. Victor saw the glint of metal. Time seemed to slow, the way it always did in moments of crisis. He saw other diners starting to notice, saw the maitre d' reaching for the phone, saw the other two men moving toward the front of the restaurant to block the exits. And he saw Elena move, the tray tilted, glasses sliding toward the armed man. Water splashed across his shirt and he reacted instinctively, stepping back, his attention broken for just a second. In that second, Elena's hand shot out and grabbed Victor's arm with surprising strength. "Down!" she commanded, her voice sharp with authority that had nothing to do with serving tables. Victor's body responded before his mind could process what was happening. Years of survival instinct took over, and he let her pull him from his chair just as chaos erupted throughout the restaurant. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, sharp cracks that sent diners screaming and diving for cover. Victor hit the floor hard, Elena's body shielding him as they rolled behind the solid wood of the bar. His ears rang, his heart pounded, and his mind struggled to catch up with what was happening. Elena had her hand on his head, keeping him low, her other hand already reaching for something at her ankle. She moved with military precision, with training that went far beyond anything a waitress would need. Victor watched in shock as she assessed the situation with the cold calculation of someone who'd been in combat before. "Stay down," she hissed, her accent shifting, her entire demeanor transformed. This wasn't the pleasant server from moments ago. This was someone else entirely. Someone who knew exactly what to do in a situation like this. More sounds echoed through the restaurant. Glass shattered. People screamed. Victor could hear the heavy footsteps of the men moving through the dining room, could hear the manager shouting something about calling the authorities. The jazz had stopped, replaced by sirens wailing in the distance, growing closer. Elena grabbed Victor's collar, forcing him to look at her. "Can you move? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," he managed, his voice steadier than he felt. "What? Who are you?" Questions later. Movement now. She pulled him up into a crouch, keeping both of them behind the bar. "Kitchen door is 15 feet behind us. When I say go, you run and you don't stop. Understand? I don't take orders from Mr. Russo." Her voice cut through his automatic resistance. "Those men came here to kill you. I can get you out alive, but only if you trust me. So right now you have a choice. Your pride or your life. Choose fast." Victor stared at this woman who'd been serving him wine moments ago. This stranger who somehow knew his name, who moved like a trained operative, who'd just put herself between him and armed men for reasons he couldn't begin to understand. Every instinct told him not to trust her. Every survival mechanism he'd honed over 3 decades screamed that this was a trap, another angle, another player in a game that never ended. But there was something in her eyes, something genuine in the fear he saw there, not fear for herself, but fear for him. It was the same look his daughter had given him last month when she'd asked him, point blank, if his business was dangerous. The same desperate hope that someone she cared about would make the right choice. He nodded once. Smart man. Elena moved, and Victor followed, staying low as she led him toward the kitchen door. They passed overturned tables, spilled wine staining the white tablecloths red, abandoned plates of food. The beautiful restaurant that had been his sanctuary was now a disaster zone. They reached the kitchen door and Elena pushed through, pulling Victor after her. The kitchen was chaos. Chefs and staff huddled together, some on phones, others pressed against the walls. Giuseppe, the old chef, looked up as they entered, his weathered face showing recognition and something that might have been approval. The back, he said simply, pointing toward the rear exit. Go. Elena didn't slow down, didn't acknowledge the old man's help, just kept moving with Victor in tow. They weaved between stainless steel prep stations, past enormous stoves still burning with abandoned pots, toward the loading dock in the back. The door opened onto an alley slick with rain, the sound of sirens now very close. Elena paused at the threshold, scanning the darkness with professional efficiency. Victor could see her processing information, calculating angles, assessing threats. This was no amateur. Whoever this woman was, she'd done this before. Clear, she said, then turned to face him. In the harsh light of the kitchen behind them, he could see her properly for the first time since the chaos started. There was a small cut on her cheek, probably from flying glass. Her ponytail had come loose, dark hair framing her face. And in her eyes, he saw something that made him realize she was just as surprised to be doing this as he was to be here. Go home, Mr. Russo, she said quietly. Get somewhere safe. The people who sent those men won't stop. But you already knew that. You've been waiting for this. How do you? I told you. I'm good at reading people. She stepped back into the kitchen, creating distance between them. And I saw a man ready to give up. Don't. Whatever you're running from, whatever you think you deserve, you're wrong. Nobody deserves what those men came to do. Victor wanted to grab her arm, to demand answers, to understand how this mysterious server had just saved his life and seemed to know everything about his situation. But sirens were very close now, and somewhere in the restaurant he could hear shouting as law enforcement arrived. Who are you? He asked instead. Elena smiled sadly. Someone who knows what it's like to want a second chance. Now go, before they lock this place down. She disappeared back into the kitchen, leaving Victor standing in the rain-soaked alley, alive and utterly confused. He stood there for a moment, feeling the cold water soak through his expensive suit, feeling the adrenaline start to fade, feeling the weight of what had just happened settle onto his shoulders. He'd been ready to die. He'd made his peace with it. And this stranger, this impossible, mysterious woman, had pulled him back from that edge with two simple words. Not tonight. Victor turned and walked into the alley, his hand instinctively moving to his pocket. His phone was there, his wallet, his keys, and something else, something that hadn't been there before. He pulled out a small piece of paper, folded once. The handwriting was precise, almost clinical. You're not the only one who wants out. We need to talk. E. Below the message was a phone number. Victor stood in the rain, staring at the note, his mind racing with questions. How had she slipped this into his pocket? When? Why save him? What did she want? Who was she really? Behind him he could hear police radios, could see the flash of emergency lights reflecting off the wet brick walls. He needed to leave, needed to get off the street before someone started asking questions he didn't want to answer. But he couldn't stop staring at that note, at the lifeline this stranger had thrown him. His phone buzzed. A text from Marco. Where are you? Heard about Lombardi's. Are you okay? Victor deleted the message without responding. Marco, his oldest friend. The man who'd warned him 3 days ago that his time was running out. The man who'd been his right hand for 15 years, but whose eyes had grown cold and distant in recent months. The man who, Victor suddenly realized with crystalline clarity, had known exactly where he'd be tonight. The betrayal hit him like a physical blow. Not the fact of it. He'd suspected for weeks that Marco was playing both sides. But the confirmation, the cold reality of being set up by someone he'd trusted with his life, his daughter's life, his legacy. Victor stood in the rain, alive when he should have been dead, holding a note from a stranger who'd saved him for reasons he didn't understand. His carefully ordered world, already crumbling, had just shattered completely. The path he'd been walking, toward acceptance, toward an end, had suddenly forked in a new direction. He thought about Elena's question from earlier. Do you believe in second chances? He hadn't. But standing here, soaked and alive and holding this paper, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not hope exactly. Hope was too strong a word for what he was feeling, but possibility. The faint, fragile possibility that maybe the exit ramps existed after all. Victor pulled out his phone, carefully dried the screen with his sleeve, and typed the number from Elena's note into his contacts. He saved it under a single letter, E. Then he walked deeper into the alley, away from the lights and sirens, away from the restaurant where he'd planned to have his last supper. His clothes were ruined. His life was in danger. His closest friend had betrayed him, and a mysterious woman with military training and impossible timing had just pulled him back from the edge. The rain fell harder, washing the city clean, or trying to. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. Victor pulled his collar up against the cold and kept walking, his mind already working through the implications, the connections, the questions that needed answers. He was alive. Against all odds, against his own plans, he was alive. And tomorrow, he would find out why. The safe house in Brooklyn smelled like old coffee and stale cigarettes, though Victor had quit smoking 10 years ago. The scent lingered in the walls, a ghost of previous occupants, previous crises, previous nights when men like him had hidden from consequences they couldn't outrun forever. Dawn broke gray and reluctant over the East River, visible through the reinforced windows that Victor had installed 5 years ago, when he first purchased this property under a shell corporation, 3 layers deep. The apartment was Spartan. A leather couch, a table, 2 chairs, a bed in the next room that had never been slept in. It was designed for function, not comfort, a place to disappear, to regroup, to plan the next move. Victor stood at the window, a cup of black coffee cooling in his hand, watching the city wake up. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the restaurant, heard the sounds, felt Elena's hand on his arm pulling him to safety. Not tonight. 2 words that had changed everything. His phone sat on the table behind him, Elena's number glowing on the screen. He'd stared at it for hours, his finger hovering over the call button, pulling back, hovering again. In his world, trust was currency, and he'd just been robbed by someone he'd paid with 15 years of loyalty. The idea of trusting another stranger, especially one who appeared out of nowhere with impossible timing and even more impossible skills, went against every survival instinct he'd developed. But he was alive. That counted for something. The door opened without warning. Victor's hand moved instinctively to his waist, then relaxed when he recognized the man entering. Tommy Delgado, his head of security for the past 8 years. Short, built like a fire hydrant with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Boss," Tommy said, closing the door behind him and engaging 3 separate locks. "You look terrible." "I feel worse." Victor set down his coffee and turned from the window. "Tell me what you found." Tommy dropped a folder on the table, the manila surface worn from handling. 3 casualties at Lombardi's, all staff. Giuseppe is in the hospital. Took some glass when the front windows shattered, but he'll be okay. The 3 men who came in are gone. Disappeared before law enforcement arrived. No witnesses willing to talk, everyone's lawyered up, and the investigating officers are already losing interest. This has organized business dispute written all over it, and you know how that goes. Victor nodded grimly. In cases like this, the authorities would go through the motions, take statements, file reports. But unless someone was willing to testify, which no one ever was, the investigation would quietly fade away. The city had bigger problems than wealthy men settling scores in expensive restaurants. "And the woman?" Victor asked, the question he'd been holding back. "The server, Elena Torres." Tommy's expression shifted slightly, and Victor recognized the look. It was the same face Tommy made when the evidence didn't add up, when something was wrong with the picture. "That's where it gets interesting, boss. There is no Elena Torres. Not in the restaurant's employment records, not in any database I can access. Giuseppe claims he hired her a week ago, paid cash under the table, said she came with excellent references. But when I pressed him, he got quiet. Real quiet. The kind of quiet that means he knows more than he's saying. Giuseppe wouldn't lie to me," Victor said. But even as he spoke, he remembered the old chef's face last night. The way he'd pointed to the back exit without hesitation. Go. As if he'd been expecting something exactly like this to happen. "Maybe not lie," Tommy said carefully, "but maybe protect. The way you protect Sophia from certain truths about what we do." Victor flinched at his daughter's name. Sophia. She was safe at her apartment near Columbia, surrounded by normal people living normal lives, probably getting ready for an early morning art history class. She didn't know about last night. Couldn't know. He'd built walls between his world and hers specifically to keep her safe from moments like these. What about the men who came to the restaurant? Victor asked, steering away from thoughts of his daughter. Any identification? Nothing solid, but I made some calls, talked to some people. Word is the Romano family is making moves. They've been quiet since the old man passed last year, but the son, Anthony Romano, he's young, ambitious, and he doesn't respect the old agreements. He sees your transition as weakness, an opportunity. Marco, Victor said quietly. The name tasted like betrayal. He told them where I'd be. Tommy's silence was confirmation enough. They both knew that only a handful of people had known about Victor's Thursday evening routine at Lombardi's. And of those people, only Marco had been growing distant. Only Marco had been asking pointed questions about Victor's plans. Only Marco had been positioned perfectly to feed information to rivals. I'm sorry, boss, I know you two go back. We went back, Victor corrected, his voice hard. Past tense. 15 years of friendship doesn't mean much when someone's willing to set you up for elimination. He moved to the table, opened the folder Tommy had brought. Inside were surveillance photos, printouts of financial records, notes in Tommy's precise handwriting, the evidence of betrayal, laid out in black and white. Marco's phone records showing calls to known Romano associates, bank transfers to offshore accounts, meeting logs that showed he'd been having private conversations with Anthony Romano for the past 3 months. Victor had suspected, but seeing it confirmed still hurt. It was like watching a wound reopened, seeing the damage clearly for the first time. There's something else, Tommy said, hesitating in a way that made Victor look up sharply. I dug into the server, Elena Torres, started looking at missing persons, witness protection, people who've gone off-grid in the past few years. Boss, I think I found something, but you're not going to like it. He pulled out another set of papers, these clearly printed from sealed government files. Victor recognized the markings. Federal case documents, the kind that required serious connections to access. Tommy had called in favors. Her real name is Elena Maria Torres, Tommy began. 32 years old, not 28. Former FBI agent, decorated, specializing in organized operations. 5 years ago, she was working a major case involving corruption within the Bureau itself. High-level agents taking payments to look the other way, to lose evidence, to warn certain families about raids. She found evidence, built a case, and testified before a grand jury. Victor's hands stilled on the papers. FBI. The word hung in the air between them like smoke. She testified against her own colleagues? Victor asked. Against her own supervisor, Special Agent Richard Dawson. He'd been on the take for years, protecting multiple operations across New York and New Jersey. Elena gathered evidence for 2 years, quietly, carefully. When she finally came forward, it brought down 12 agents and exposed protection rackets worth millions. Let me guess, Victor said, his mind already racing ahead. Her life became complicated after that. That's putting it mildly. The Bureau couldn't fire her. She was a whistleblower, protected by law. But they made her life impossible, transferred her to dead-end assignments, isolated her from other agents, made sure everyone knew she was a traitor to the Brotherhood. Her family disowned her. Her father was NYPD for 30 years, saw what she did as betrayal. Her younger brother stopped taking her calls. She lost everything. Tommy pulled out a photograph. It showed Elena, a younger version wearing an FBI jacket, standing with a team of agents. Her smile was genuine, her eyes bright with purpose. She looked like someone who believed in what she was doing, who thought justice mattered. 2 years ago she resigned, disappeared into witness protection, though officially that's not what they call it. The Bureau was worried that some of the people whose operations she'd exposed might come looking for revenge. They gave her a new identity, relocated her, set her up with basic support. But witness protection only works if you follow the rules. And according to my contact, Elena Torres has been off the grid for the past 18 months. No check-ins, no contact, nothing. Until she shows up as a server in my restaurant, Victor finished, staring at the photograph. The woman in the picture and the woman who'd saved his life were the same person, but something fundamental had changed. The brightness in her eyes had been replaced by wariness, the confidence by caution. Boss, this could be a setup, Tommy said carefully. Think about it. Former FBI agent appears out of nowhere, saves your life, creates a debt. It's a classic approach. Make you trust her, get close, gather information. If she wanted me eliminated, she had the perfect opportunity last night, Victor countered. She could have let those men finish what they came to do. Instead, she put herself in danger to save me. Maybe she's playing a longer game. Maybe the Bureau wants you alive for something else. Or maybe, Tommy paused, then decided to say it anyway. Maybe she's working with the Romano family. What better way to get close to you than to save your life? Victor considered this, turning the photograph in his hands. Elena Torres, FBI agent turned whistleblower, turned witness turned ghost. A woman who'd sacrificed everything to do what she thought was right, only to lose her entire life in the process. He understood that kind of loss, that kind of isolation. He'd been feeling it himself for months now, as his world contracted and allies became enemies and the empire he'd built started to crumble. I need to talk to her, Victor said finally, face to face. I need to understand what she wants, why she saved me. That's risky, boss. If she's compromised. Everything is risky now, Tommy. The moment Marco betrayed me, the moment I decided to step back, the moment those men walked into Lombardi's, all of it was risky. But I'm still here, still breathing because of her. I owe her the courtesy of a conversation. Tommy didn't look happy, but he nodded. I found an address, apartment in Queens, registered to a Maria Gonzalez. Rent paid 6 months in advance, cash. Fits the profile of someone trying to stay invisible. He wrote the address on a piece of paper, handed it to Victor. I can have a team there in 20 minutes. We do this smart, controlled, with backup. No, Victor said. I go alone. Boss, alone, Tommy. If she wanted me dead, I'd be dead. If she's looking for something else, bringing an army won't help. This is a conversation between two people who understand what it's like to be betrayed by the people they trusted. That requires privacy. Tommy looked like he wanted to argue further, but Victor's tone made it clear the decision was final. After a moment, he nodded reluctantly. At least take this. He pulled out a small device, no bigger than a button. Panic alarm. One press, I'll have people there in 5 minutes. Victor took the device, slipped it into his pocket. Fair enough. And boss, watch yourself. FBI training doesn't go away just because someone changes careers. If this goes wrong, it won't, Victor said, with more confidence than he felt. Or it will, and at least I'll have answers. The address led Victor to a neighborhood in Queens that he recognized from his youth. These were the streets where working families lived. Immigrants chasing the American dream, young couples saving for their first house, elderly residents who'd been here for 50 years and refused to leave even as the neighborhood changed around them. Elena's building was a 3-story walk-up, brown brick weathered by decades of city life. The front door security was minimal. Victor bypassed it easily, years of practice making the process almost automatic. The hallway inside smelled like cooking spices and old carpet. Somewhere above, a baby cried, normal life happening all around him, completely unaware of the currents of danger flowing just beneath the surface. Apartment 2B. Victor stood outside the door listening. No sound from inside. No television, no music, no movement. Either she wasn't home or she was waiting to see what he'd do. He knocked. 3 times. Firm but not aggressive. Silence. He knocked again. Elena, it's Victor Russo. I just want to talk. More silence. He was about to knock a 3rd time when he heard movement inside. Footsteps, light and careful. The sound of someone checking the peephole. A long pause where he could feel her deciding what to do. The door opened 6 inches, held by a chain lock that wouldn't stop anyone determined but might slow them down for a few crucial seconds. Elena looked out at him, her face carefully neutral. She was wearing jeans and a gray sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Without the server uniform, she looked younger, more vulnerable, but her eyes were alert, assessing, ready for trouble. How did you find me? She asked. I have resources. You knew I would. I was hoping for at least 24 hours before you tracked me down. I'm motivated. Victor gestured to the chain. Are you going to let me in? Or are we having this conversation in the hallway where your neighbors can hear everything? Elena studied him for a long moment, then sighed and closed the door. He heard the chain sliding free, and when the door opened again, it was fully. She stepped back, letting him enter, her hand notably near her waistband where he suspected she had a weapon. No backup? She asked, closing the door behind him. Should I have brought some? Depends on what you're here for. The apartment was small, a studio, basically, with a kitchenette, a bathroom door, and a single room that served as living space, bedroom, and office. But it was immaculate. The bed was made with military precision. Books were stacked neatly on a small desk. A laptop sat closed beside them. There were no personal photos, no decorations, nothing that would tell you who lived here. It was a place designed for quick departure, for a life lived in transit. You've done this before, Victor observed. Living like this. Ready to run. Occupational hazard. Elena moved to the small kitchen area, putting the counter between them. You want coffee? I was about to make some. I didn't come here for coffee. No, you came here for answers. But we're going to be civilized about this, so coffee it is. She started the machine without waiting for his agreement. You found out who I am. Former FBI. Whistleblower. Person non grata in approximately 17 different circles. The question is, are you here to threaten me, to buy me off, or to ask why I saved your life? All three, possibly, Victor said, studying her. But mostly the last one. You put yourself in danger for me. Why? Elena poured 2 cups of coffee, slid one across the counter toward him. You want the simple answer or the complicated one? Try the truth. She smiled without humor. The truth is complicated, Mr. Russo. The truth is that I recognized you the moment you walked into that restaurant. I'd studied your file years ago when I was still with the Bureau. You were a person of interest in multiple investigations, though they could never make anything stick. You were smart, careful, always one step ahead. Past tense? Past tense, she confirmed. Because 6 months ago something changed. You started pulling back, making moves that looked like preparation for retirement, and that made you vulnerable. In your world, showing weakness is like chumming the water for predators. Victor said nothing, just watched her over the rim of his coffee cup. She was right, of course. Everything she was saying was accurate, which meant she'd been paying attention, tracking his movements even after she'd left the Bureau. I've been working at Lombardi's for 3 weeks. Not one, Elena continued. Giuseppe is an old friend. His nephew was an informant I worked with years ago. When I needed a place to hide, to watch, to understand what was happening, he gave me the job. And I watched you, Mr. Russo. Every Thursday evening, same table, same meal, same expression on your face. A man who'd made a decision and was waiting for consequences. You knew they were coming, Victor said quietly. Last night, you knew. I suspected. I'd been seeing the same faces in the neighborhood. Men who didn't belong, who were watching the restaurant, taking notes. I recognized the pattern, surveillance before action. And when those 3 men walked in last night, their body language told me everything I needed to know. They weren't there for dinner. So you saved me. Why? If you studied my file, you know what I am, what I've done. Why risk yourself for someone like me? Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee as if it held answers. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, more personal than it had been. Because I saw myself in you, she said. Someone who built a life, a career, a reputation, and then watched it all crumble because they tried to do the right thing. I testified against corrupt agents because it was right, because they were breaking laws they'd sworn to uphold. And it cost me everything. My career, my family, my identity, everything. She looked up, met his eyes directly. You're trying to get out, aren't you? Trying to step away from your organization, to leave that life behind. And it's destroying you, because the people around you see it as betrayal, as weakness. They don't understand that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. Victor felt something shift in his chest, a recognition so profound it almost hurt. This woman, this stranger who'd saved his life, understood him in a way that no one had in years. Not Marco, who'd betrayed him, not his remaining allies, who saw his withdrawal as abandonment, not even his daughter, who he'd kept carefully shielded from the truth of his life. Who are you running from? He asked quietly. The Bureau wouldn't keep hunting you after all this time, so who is it? Elena's expression hardened. The people I helped put away had connections, not just within the Bureau, but outside it. One name in particular, Michael Romano. He was using corrupt agents to protect his father's operations. When I testified, his network collapsed. He lost millions, and he swore that he'd make me pay for it. Victor's blood went cold. Michael Romano, Anthony Romano's uncle. You see the problem, Elena said grimly. When I recognized you, when I started researching what was happening in your world, I realized that the people coming after you were the same people who've been hunting me. The Romano family. They want you gone because you're in their way, and they want me gone because I cost them money and reputation. So saving me was, what? An alliance of convenience? Enemy of my enemy? No, Elena said firmly. Saving you was the right thing to do. I saw a man about to give up, about to let terrible people win because he was tired of fighting. And I couldn't let that happen. Not when I've spent the past 5 years running, hiding, surviving. Someone needed to stand up. Someone needed to say, not tonight. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning. Victor set down his coffee cup, his mind working through the implications. The Romano family, Michael Romano's network, Marco's betrayal, Elena's past. All of it was connected, threads weaving together into a picture that was both clearer and more dangerous than he'd realized. "They'll come after both of us now," Victor said. "If they find out you saved me, if they realize you're still alive and in the city." "I know," Elena interrupted. "I knew the risk when I pulled you behind that bar, but I was tired of hiding, tired of letting fear dictate every decision. And maybe," she hesitated, then continued, "maybe I was tired of being alone in this fight." Victor studied her face, seeing past the careful control to the exhaustion underneath. She was younger than him by more than a decade, but she carried the same weight he did. The weight of choices and consequences, of bridges burned and prices paid. "You're proposing what exactly?" he asked. "An alliance? Partnership?" "I'm proposing that we stop running," Elena said. "Both of us. You have resources, connections, knowledge of how the Romano family operates. I have training, skills, and a very personal motivation to see them held accountable. Together, we might actually survive this. Separately," she shrugged, "we're both living on borrowed time. I have a daughter," Victor said quietly. "Sophia. She's 19, at Columbia. She doesn't know anything about my business, about what I've done. I've kept her separate from all of this specifically to protect her. If I go to war with the Romano family, if I stop trying to fade quietly into the background, I put her at risk." "Mr. Russo," Elena said gently, "your daughter is already at risk. The moment Marco betrayed you, the moment the Romano family decided you were an obstacle, everyone close to you became a target. The question isn't whether she's in danger. The question is whether you want to face that danger proactively or wait for them to make the first move." Victor's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, saw Marco's name on the screen. Another text. "Victor, we need to talk. I can explain. Call me." He showed the screen to Elena. "My former right hand, the man who set me up last night. Are you going to answer?" "No." Victor deleted the message. "Whatever he has to say, I don't need to hear it. Betrayal is betrayal, regardless of the excuse." His phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Marco. It was Tommy, and the message made Victor's heart stop. "Boss, Sophia's apartment. She's gone. Signs of struggle. This wasn't random. Call me now." The phone fell from Victor's hand, clattered on the counter. Elena moved immediately, coming around to see the screen, to understand what had just drained all the color from his face. "Your daughter," she said, understanding instantly. Victor couldn't speak. His worst fear, the nightmare that had haunted every decision he'd made for the past 19 years, had just become reality. They had Sophia. The Romano family, Marco, whoever was behind this, they had his daughter, his brilliant, innocent daughter who wanted to open an art gallery, who loved French Impressionism, who made him laugh with her terrible jokes. They had her. "Mr. Russo. Victor, look at me." Elena's hand was on his arm, firm and steady. "Look at me. We're going to get her back. You hear me? We're going to find her and bring her home. You don't know that," Victor said, his voice breaking. "You can't promise that." "You're right, I can't, but I can promise you this. I won't stop until we do. I know how to track people, how to find them, how to get them out of impossible situations. That was my job for 10 years, and right now, that's what we're going to do. Together." Victor's phone rang. "Tommy." He picked it up with shaking hands, put it on speaker. "Boss, I'm at her apartment now," Tommy said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Place has been tossed. Laptop's gone, phone's gone. Neighbors heard raised voices about an hour ago but didn't think anything of it. This was professional, boss. They knew exactly when she'd be here, exactly when she'd be alone." "Demands?" Victor managed. "Have they made contact?" "Not yet, but they will. This is leverage, boss. They want something from you, and they'll use her to get it." Victor closed his eyes, fighting against the panic threatening to overwhelm him. Sophia, his baby girl, in the hands of people who wouldn't hesitate to hurt her to get what they wanted. "Tommy, I need you to activate everyone we have. Every contact, every resource. I want eyes everywhere, ears on every conversation. Someone knows something. Find them." "Already started, boss, and there's something else. We got a tip. Anonymous came through a burner phone. Said if you want to see your daughter alive, you need to meet Marco. Tonight. Alone. Location to follow." "It's a trap," Elena said immediately. "They'll kill you both." "I don't care," Victor said, his voice hard as steel. They have my daughter. They want me. Fine, they can have me. But Sophia walks free. No, Elena said firmly. That's not how this works. You go in there alone, you die. And Sophia becomes a permanent hostage or worse. They're using her to force you into making stupid decisions. Don't give them the satisfaction. Then what do you suggest? Victor demanded, his control finally cracking. Because every second we stand here talking, my daughter is with people who wouldn't think twice about hurting her. Elena met his anger with calm certainty. I suggest we do this smart. We accept the meeting, but we don't go alone and we don't go unprepared. I told you, I know how to get people out of impossible situations. Trust me, please. Victor looked at this woman he'd known for less than 24 hours. This former FBI agent with her own ghosts and her own reasons for fighting. She'd saved his life once already. Could he trust her to help save the only person in the world who truly mattered to him? He didn't have a choice. Not really. Because going in alone, as Elena said, would just get him killed. And dead. He couldn't help Sophia at all. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, we do this your way. But Elena, if anything happens to my daughter, it won't, she said with absolute conviction. Because we're not going to let it. Now, she grabbed her laptop, opened it with quick, efficient movements. Tell me everything you know about the Romano family's operations. Where they operate, where they hold people, what kind of security they use. Every detail matters. We have hours, maybe less, to plan this. So, talk. Victor started talking, and as he shared information he'd spent years gathering, as Elena took notes and asked questions with the precision of someone who'd done this before, he felt something unexpected. Hope. Small, fragile, but real. He wasn't alone anymore. For better or worse, he had an ally. Someone who understood the stakes, who knew what they were facing, who wouldn't back down. Somewhere in this city, his daughter was scared and in danger. But Victor Russo wasn't the man he'd been yesterday. The man who was ready to give up, to face his fate passively. That man had died in the chaos at Lombardi's. This man was going to fight. And heaven help anyone who stood between him and his daughter. The abandoned warehouse in Red Hook stood like a monument to Brooklyn's industrial past. Rusted steel beams reaching toward a cloudy sky, broken windows that caught the last light of evening. Outside, the storm that had been threatening all day finally broke, rain hammering the corrugated metal roof with a sound like scattered applause. Inside, Victor Russo sat in the passenger seat of Elena's decade-old Honda, studying blueprints spread across his lap. The car was parked 3 blocks from the Romano family's known meeting location, hidden in the shadows of another abandoned building. Through the rain-streaked windshield, he could see the warehouse where his daughter was being held. 2 entrances, Elena said quietly, pointing to the blueprints. Front loading dock and a side door here. Tommy's team has eyes on both. No movement in the past 20 minutes, but we count at least 6 men inside, possibly more. Victor's jaw tightened. 6 men between him and Sophia. 6 obstacles that needed to be overcome without putting his daughter at additional risk. Every second that passed was another second she was afraid. Another second she was in danger because of who her father was. The meeting Marco set up. It's in 40 minutes, Victor said, checking his watch. He specified the pier, not the warehouse, which means this is a secondary location. They're keeping her separate. Smart, Elena admitted. They send you to one location. Keep the leverage somewhere else. If things go wrong, they still have control. She pulled out her phone, checked a message from Tommy. But that gives us an opening. While they're waiting for you at the pier, we hit the warehouse. Fast, quiet, and we're gone before they realize what's happening. Victor looked at her profile, illuminated by the phone's glow. In the past 8 hours since they'd learned about Sophia's kidnapping, Elena had transformed. The cautious server, the reluctant witness, had been replaced by someone who moved with absolute confidence. She'd made calls to old contacts, pulled up building schematics, coordinated with Tommy's team, as if she'd been doing this her entire life, which, Victor supposed, she had. You're certain about the security? He asked. If we go in and there are more people than we expected. There's never certainty in operations like this. Elena interrupted gently. Only calculated risk. But yes, I'm as certain as I can be. Tommy's surveillance shows a skeleton crew. The Romano family is stretched thin right now. They're setting up the meeting with you, managing multiple territories, dealing with their own internal issues. They didn't expect you to track Sophia here this quickly, because they don't know about you, Victor said. They don't know I have someone with your particular skills helping me. Elena smiled slightly. That's our advantage. They think you're predictable, that you'll follow their script. Show up at the meeting, negotiate, probably walk into an ambush. What they're not expecting is for you to ignore their setup entirely and come for Sophia directly. Victor's phone buzzed. Marco, for the 10th time that evening. Another message. Victor, please, this has gone too far. Meet me. We can fix this. Trust me. Trust. The word was almost laughable now. Victor had trusted Marco with everything. His business, his secrets, his life. And Marco had repaid that trust by making a deal with the Romano family, by feeding them information, by setting up an ambush at Lombardi's. Whatever excuses Marco had, whatever justifications he'd convinced himself of, they didn't matter anymore. He keeps calling, Elena observed. He's scared, Victor said, deleting the message. He knows I've figured out his role in this. He knows that once Sophia is safe, I'll deal with him. Will you? The question hung in the air between them. Victor thought about the man he'd been just days ago, tired, ready to walk away from everything, ready to let fate take its course. That man might have forgiven Marco, might have understood the pressures that led to betrayal, might have found a way to simply disappear and let old grudges die. But that man's daughter hadn't been taken. That man hadn't been forced to confront the consequences of his choices in the most brutal way possible. I don't know, Victor admitted. Ask me again when Sophia is home. Elena nodded, accepting this. She checked her watch. Tommy should be in position by now. You ready? Victor looked out at the warehouse, thinking about his daughter somewhere inside those walls. Sophia, who'd called him 2 weeks ago excited about a Monet exhibition at the Met. Sophia, who'd texted him pictures of her terrible cooking attempts with laughing emojis. Sophia, who'd hugged him the last time they had dinner together and told him she loved him, no matter what. I'm ready, he said. They exited the car into the rain, moving quickly toward the warehouse. Elena had changed into dark clothes, practical gear that allowed easy movement. Victor had done the same, feeling strange in the tactical outfit after years of expensive suits. But this wasn't a boardroom negotiation. This was something more fundamental, a father fighting for his child. Tommy materialized from the shadows, his stocky form barely visible in the darkness. Boss, everything's set. My team has the exits covered. The 6 men inside are on the main floor, playing cards, waiting for instructions. Your daughter's being held on the 2nd level, northeast corner. 1 person watching her. A woman, interestingly enough. Romano's using a woman to guard Sophia? Victor asked, surprised. Probably figured it would make your daughter more comfortable, Elena said. Less threatening. Smart psychology. She turned to Tommy. How do we get to the 2nd level without alerting the ground floor? Fire escape on the east side, Tommy said, pointing. Leads directly to the 2nd level. It's rusty, makes some noise. But in this rain, they might not notice. Once you're up there, you'll need to move fast. Get Sophia. Get out. Elena nodded, then looked at Victor. I'll take the fire escape. Create a distraction if needed. You come up behind me, grab Sophia, and we extract through the side door. Tommy's team handles anyone who tries to follow. I should be the one going up first, Victor protested. She's my daughter, and if something goes wrong, she'll need you alive to get her out, Elena countered. Let me clear the path. That's what I'm trained for. Victor wanted to argue, but he recognized the logic. Elena had spent years doing exactly this kind of operation. He was successful in his world because he knew when to delegate to people with better expertise. This was no different. Okay, he agreed reluctantly. But Elena, be careful. She smiled, the expression transforming her serious face for just a moment. Careful is my specialty, remember? Not tonight, that's my motto. They moved toward the fire escape, Tommy fading back into the shadows to coordinate with his team. The metal stairs were indeed rusty, groaning softly as Elena tested the first step. The rain helped, providing acoustic cover for the noise. She began climbing, her movements smooth and practiced, despite the slippery metal. Victor followed, each step feeling like it took an eternity. Below them, through a broken window, he could glimpse the main floor. Men sitting at a makeshift table, cards in hand, weapons nearby but not immediately accessible. They looked bored, like guards who'd been told to wait with no clear sense of how long they'd be waiting. The 2nd level was darker, lit only by a few emergency lights that cast everything in amber shadows. Elena reached the platform, crouched low, and signaled for Victor to wait. She moved forward, peering through a grimy window into what looked like an old office space. Victor's heart hammered in his chest. Sophia was in there, so close. After hours of fear and planning and desperate hope, his daughter was just a few feet away. Elena turned back, gave him a thumbs up, then held up one finger. One guard, as Tommy had reported. She pointed to herself, then to the door, then made a quick motion indicating her plan. Victor nodded, understanding. She tried the door handle. Locked, but it was old, worn. Elena pulled a small tool from her pocket, the kind of thing FBI agents learned to use in training, and worked the lock with practiced efficiency. 30 seconds. The mechanism clicked. Elena pushed the door open slowly, slipping inside before Victor could see what was happening. He heard a brief, muffled sound, a confrontation, quick and decisive, then silence. Clear, Elena called softly. Victor pushed through the door and saw his daughter. Sophia sat in a chair in the corner of the office, her hands bound with zip ties, her eyes wide with fear that transformed instantly to shock when she saw him. She was unharmed. Victor's trained eye immediately cataloged this, looking for injuries, for signs of mistreatment. Her clothes were rumpled, her hair messy, but she was okay. "Dad?" she whispered, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Victor crossed the room in 3 strides, dropping to his knees beside her chair. "Baby, I'm here, I've got you, you're safe now." He pulled out a knife, cut through the zip ties. Sophia's arms came free and she immediately wrapped them around him, holding on like she used to when she was a little girl having a nightmare. Victor held her back, one hand cradling her head, feeling her shake with relief and residual fear. "I was so scared," Sophia said against his shoulder. "These men came to my apartment. They said you owed them something, that I was insurance." "I know, baby. I know. But it's over now. We're getting you out of here." Sophia pulled back slightly, looking past him to where Elena stood by the door, keeping watch. The woman who'd been guarding her was unconscious in the corner, zip-tied and gagged. Elena had worked efficiently, professionally, without unnecessary force. "Who?" Sophia started to ask. "A friend," Victor said. "Someone who's helping us. We'll explain everything later, but right now we need to move." Elena turned from the door. "We have a problem. Someone downstairs just got a call. They're mobilizing. We've got maybe 2 minutes before this place is swarming with people looking for us." Victor helped Sophia to her feet, keeping himself between her and the door. "The fire escape? Compromised. They'll be watching it now." Elena's mind was clearly racing, calculating options, running scenarios. "We need another way out." "There's a loading elevator," Sophia said suddenly. Both Victor and Elena turned to look at her. Sophia pointed to a door on the far side of the office. "I heard them talking about it earlier. It goes straight to the loading dock level. They use it to move equipment." Elena moved to the door, found it unlocked. Beyond was indeed an old freight elevator, the industrial kind with a metal gate instead of proper doors. It looked ancient but functional. "It'll be loud," Elena said. "The moment we start it, everyone will know where we are. Then we move fast," Victor said. "Get to the loading dock out to the street. Tommy's team can provide cover." Elena hesitated only a moment, then nodded. "Okay, but when I say run, you run. No hesitation, no looking back. Understood?" Victor and Sophia both nodded. Elena pulled the elevator gate open, ushered them inside, then closed it and hit the button. The machinery groaned to life, cables creaking as the platform began its descent. The noise was indeed significant. Even over the rain, even through the thick walls, Victor could hear shouting from below. They'd been discovered. The 2 minutes Elena had predicted had shrunk to seconds. The elevator reached the loading dock level and Elena yanked the gate open. The loading dock was empty. Tommy's team had cleared it, but Victor could hear footsteps running toward them from inside the building. They had moments, maybe less. "Go!" Elena commanded, pushing Sophia toward the open dock door where rain and freedom waited. Sophia ran, and Victor started to follow, but then he heard it. A sound from behind them, inside the elevator shaft. Someone had called the elevator back up. "They're cutting off our retreat," Elena said, her hand moving to her waistband. "Victor, get Sophia out of here. Now." "I'm not leaving you." "Yes, you are. Your daughter needs you alive." "Go." Men appeared in the doorway leading from the warehouse interior, 4 of them spreading out, blocking the path. But the loading dock door was still open, still offering escape. Victor grabbed Sophia's hand and ran. Behind him, he heard Elena's voice, strong and authoritative, trained to command attention. She was buying them time, creating confusion, using her FBI experience to talk, to negotiate. to make them pause and think rather than react. They burst out into the rain, Tommy appearing immediately with two of his men. "This way, boss." Victor let Tommy guide them, his team forming a protective circle around him and Sophia as they moved quickly through the rain-slicked streets. Behind them, the warehouse was chaos. Shouting, confusion, but no sounds of escalation. Elena was still talking, still controlling the situation. They reached Tommy's van, Sophia climbing in first, Victor turning back toward the warehouse. "Elena," he started. "Already on it, boss," Tommy said, but his expression was troubled. Through the rain, Victor could see figures at the warehouse entrance, and Elena wasn't among them. Victor's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered, already knowing what he'd hear. "Mr. Russo." The voice was smooth, cultured with just a hint of accent. "Anthony Romano. You've made quite a mess of my operation tonight. Very impressive. And your new friend, the former FBI agent, she's quite resourceful. A shame she'll have to pay the price for her interference." "Let her go," Victor said, his voice hard. "She's not part of this. This is between you and me." "Oh, but she made herself part of this when she saved your life. When she helped you steal back what we'd acquired. You understand leverage, Mr. Russo. You've used it yourself many times. Well, now I have leverage, and we're going to have that conversation after all. Tomorrow, same pier, same time. But this time you will come alone, you will be unarmed, and you will give me what I want. Which is? Your complete surrender. Your territories, your operations, your contacts, everything. Sign it all over to me, and both you and your FBI friend go free. Refuse and—" Romano paused. "Well, I think you understand the consequences. I'll be in touch with details." The line went dead. Victor stood in the rain, watching the warehouse, his mind reeling. He'd saved his daughter. Sophia was safe, sitting in the van behind him, protected by Tommy's team. But Elena, who'd sacrificed everything to help him, who'd put herself in danger for a man she barely knew, was now a prisoner because of him. "Dad?" Sophia's voice came from behind him. "Dad, who was that? What's happening?" Victor turned to face his daughter, seeing the confusion and fear in her eyes. She'd been through so much in the past day, and it wasn't over. Not yet, because now he had another choice to make. Another person depending on him, another life hanging in the balance. "Get Sophia somewhere safe," he told Tommy. "Somewhere the Romano family can never find her. And then we plan." "Boss, Elena risked everything to save my daughter," Victor said quietly. "Now I'm going to return the favor, whatever it takes." In the van, Sophia watched her father through the rain-streaked window, finally beginning to understand the weight he carried, the world he'd been trying to protect her from. And in that moment she saw not the businessman he'd always pretended to be, but the man he actually was. Someone who'd done terrible things for reasons he thought were right, and who was now willing to sacrifice everything to save someone who'd shown him kindness when he'd needed it most. The storm intensified, thunder rolling across Brooklyn like a promise of more chaos to come. And Victor Russo, standing in the rain with his daughter finally safe and his unlikely ally now in danger, made a decision. He was done running, done compromising, done letting other people dictate the terms. Tomorrow, he would face Anthony Romano, but not as a defeated man ready to surrender, as someone who'd finally found something worth fighting for, not territory, not reputation, not legacy, but people, the ones who'd shown him that even in the darkest corners of his world, redemption was still possible. The cabin in upstate New York sat hidden among pine trees, 3 hours from the city, and a lifetime away from the chaos they'd left behind. Dawn painted the sky in shades of gray and gold. The storm finally passed, leaving everything clean and new. Victor stood at the window, a cup of coffee cooling in his hands, watching Sophia sleep on the couch. She'd finally dozed off an hour ago, exhausted from fear and relief. Tommy's team had secured the cabin, swept it for any surveillance, and now stood guard outside. Safe. For now. But Elena wasn't safe, and that knowledge burned in Victor's chest like a fire he couldn't extinguish. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Pier 47, noon. Come alone, or she dies. Victor closed his eyes, thinking through every possible scenario. Romano had leverage, but leverage only worked if Victor cared about the outcome. And he cared deeply, not just because Elena had saved his daughter, but because she'd shown him something he'd forgotten existed. Genuine courage. The kind that didn't calculate odds or measure risks, but simply did what was right. You're planning something, Sophia said quietly from behind him. Victor turned. His daughter sat up on the couch, her hair messy, her eyes red from crying and exhaustion, but alert. Watching him with an intensity he recognized it was the same way he looked at problems that needed solving. Sophia, you should rest. Don't, she interrupted. Don't treat me like a child anymore, Dad. Not after what happened. Those men took me because of who you are, what you do. I think I deserve the truth now. Victor set down his coffee, moved to sit across from her. For 19 years, he'd protected her from this world, built walls between his business and her life. But the walls had crumbled, and his daughter was looking at him with eyes that demanded honesty. The woman who helped rescue you, Victor began slowly. Elena, she's being held because she saved my life. The people who took you want me to surrender everything. My business, my connections, my territory. If I refuse, they'll hurt her. So you're going to give them what they want? No, Victor said firmly. I'm going to give them something better. The truth. Sophia frowned, confused. I don't understand. For months I've been trying to step away from my business, but I was doing it quietly, hoping to just fade away without consequences. That's not how this world works. People saw my withdrawal as weakness, an opportunity, and it put everyone I care about in danger, including you. He took his daughter's hands, holding them gently. So I'm going to do what I should have done from the beginning. I'm going public. I'm contacting the authorities, offering full cooperation, giving them everything they need to dismantle the organizations that operate in my territories, including the Romano family. Sophia's eyes widened. Dad, won't that put you at risk? More risk than I'm already in? Probably not. Victor smiled sadly. But it's the right thing to do. And Elena showed me that sometimes doing the right thing means accepting the consequences. Tommy appeared in the doorway, his expression urgent. Boss, we've got incoming. Marco just called, says he needs to meet you before the pier. Says he has information about Elena's location. Victor stood, his body tense. Marco, after everything he's done, why would I trust him? He sounded scared, boss. Real scared. Said the Romano situation has gone wrong, that people are going to get hurt, that he needs to make things right. For a long moment, Victor considered this. Marco had betrayed him, set him up, played both sides. But they'd been friends for 15 years. And people, Victor had learned, were complicated. They made mistakes, sometimes terrible ones. Tell him I'll meet him, but not alone. And Tommy, I want you recording everything. The meeting point was a diner off Route 87, neutral ground where neither family held influence. Victor arrived with Tommy, finding Marco already in a back booth, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 2 days. Victor, Marco said, standing, thank you for coming. I know I don't deserve. You don't. Victor agreed coldly. So talk fast. Where's Elena? Marco sat down heavily, his hands shaking. The Romano warehouse in Staten Island. But Victor, you need to understand. It's not just Anthony anymore. His uncle Michael is involved now. The one who was using corrupt FBI agents. He recognized Elena, realized who she was. This isn't about you anymore. This is about settling old scores. Victor felt ice in his veins. Michael Romano. The man Elena had testified against. The man who'd lost millions because of her courage. Why are you telling me this? Victor asked. Because I'm tired, Marco said simply. Tired of the games, the betrayals, the constant looking over my shoulder. They threatened my son, Victor. My kid. Said if I didn't help them get to you, they'd hurt him. So I did what they asked. But I never wanted this. Never wanted people kidnapped. Never wanted anyone hurt. Intent doesn't erase consequences, Marco. I know. Marco pulled out a flash drive, slid it across the table. This has everything. Romano family operations, the corrupt agents Michael still has on payroll, the accounts, the connections, everything you need to bring them down, and he pulled out a piece of paper. Blueprints for the Staten Island warehouse, where they're holding Elena, security schedules, guard positions. Victor stared at the items on the table, then at his old friend. This is your redemption? Information? It's all I have left to give, Marco said quietly. I'm turning myself in after this. Federal authorities. I'll testify, provide evidence, take whatever punishment comes. But first, I'm helping you get your friend back. It's the least I can do. Victor picked up the flash drive and blueprints, studying Marco's face for deception and finding only exhaustion. People were complicated. They made mistakes. Sometimes they tried to fix them. Tommy's been recording this conversation, Victor said. Everything you just gave me, every word you said. The authorities will have it all. Good, Marco said. I'm done running from consequences. We both should have done this years ago, Victor. Walked away clean. But we were too proud, too scared. At least now we can try to make things right. By evening, Victor stood at Pier 47, exactly as Romano had demanded. But he wasn't alone, and he wasn't unarmed with just desperation. In his pocket was Marco's flash drive. Behind him, watching from vehicles and shadows, was Tommy's team. And in federal offices across the city, agents were already reviewing the information Marco had provided, preparing warrants, coordinating raids. Anthony Romano arrived with 3 men, looking confident and controlled. Mr. Russo, I'm pleased you decided to be reasonable. Do you have the documents? The transfers of territory? I have something better, Victor said calmly. The truth. Federal agents are raiding your uncle's operations right now. They have evidence of corruption, racketeering, witness intimidation. By tomorrow, the Romano family will be answering questions they can't bribe their way out of. Romano's confidence cracked. You're bluffing. You'd never cooperate with authorities. I would to save someone who saved my daughter. I would to finally do the right thing. Victor pulled out his phone, showed Romano a news alert already breaking. Major operation against organized networks, multiple arrests. Romano's face went pale. You've destroyed yourself along with us. You know that, right? Probably, Victor agreed. But I'll sleep better. Now, where is Elena Torres? Before Romano could answer, police vehicles appeared from multiple directions, sirens blazing. Federal agents in tactical gear emerged, surrounding the pier. Tommy had coordinated everything perfectly. Anthony Romano, an agent called out. You're under arrest. In the chaos of arrests and rights being read, Victor slipped away. He had one more thing to do. The Staten Island warehouse was empty when Victor arrived. The federal raid had cleared it out hours ago, but in an office on the 2nd floor, he found Elena, freed by authorities, sitting on a desk with a blanket around her shoulders and a federal agent taking her statement. She looked up when Victor entered and her face broke into a tired smile. You actually did it. You went to the authorities. You taught me that doing the right thing matters more than protecting yourself, Victor said quietly. Even when it costs everything. The agent excused himself, giving them privacy. Elena stood, faced Victor directly. What happens now? To you? I'll cooperate fully, testify, accept whatever consequences come. My lawyers think I can avoid prison, given my cooperation and the fact that I'm helping dismantle entire criminal networks. But my old life is over. Everything I built is gone. And your daughter? Safe. Finally, truly safe. She knows the truth now. About me. About what I did. We'll have to rebuild our relationship, but at least it'll be built on honesty. Victor moved closer. What about you? Michael Romano is facing charges because of your original testimony. You'll be a witness again. I know. But this time I'm not scared. This time I'm not alone. Elena reached out, took his hand. We did something good, Victor. We stopped running and faced the truth. That counts for something. 6 months later, Victor and Elena stood in a small diner in Portland, Oregon. It wasn't fancy, just good food and honest people. Victor wore jeans and a flannel shirt, his expensive suits packed away. Elena had her hair down, relaxed in a way she hadn't been in years. Table 7 needs refills, she called to him, smiling. On it, Victor replied, grabbing the coffee pot. Sophia visited on weekends, slowly forgiving, slowly understanding. She was still at Columbia, still pursuing her dreams, but now she knew the full truth about her father, and she respected him more for walking away than she ever had when he was powerful. The bell above the door chimed. An older couple entered, looking for breakfast. Normal customers living normal lives. Victor grabbed menus, catching Elena's eye as he passed. She'd saved his life twice, once by pulling him to cover, once by showing him that redemption was possible. And he'd saved hers by finally choosing courage over comfort. Welcome to Elena's diner, Victor said to the customers, smiling genuinely for the first time in years. Coffee to start? Outside, rain began to fall. But inside, where 2 former ghosts had built something real from the ashes of their old lives, everything was warm and bright and possible. Not tonight, they'd said to death and fear and the darkness of their pasts. And finally, they meant it.